Welcome to Ordinary People, Extraordinary Things. I'm so honored to be here with Crystal. Crystal, thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
If people don't know who you are the money-saving mom, but you are so much more, I know, as well. Could you give three words or phrases that describe you?
You asked me this, and this is such a good question. I was going to ask my husband because I was really curious if our words would line up. I came up with passionate, driven, and deep.
Mm. And what do you mean by deep?
So I'm the kind of person that I do not like to have surfacey conversations. Like if I am talking with you, I don't want to talk about the weather. I want to talk about like how's your heart and what's God doing in your life and how can I be praying for you and that sort of thing.
Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. How did money-saving mom get started?
So my husband and I decided like we just really felt like we wanted to stay out of debt. And so when we got married, we've been married for almost 22 years. He was going to go to law school. And we set this audacious goal that we were going to do it debt free. And we are both blessed to come from families where our parents modeled really wise financial stewardship for us and taught us a lot of things. So we went into marriage with that. We went into marriage without any debt and with money and savings. And so we set in on this journey to stay out of debt, go through law school. And that was kind of when this whole idea of sharing about saving money started because we were living in this little basement apartment and we were on this beans and rice budget. We had one car. My husband was at law school and his job most of the day. So I'm at home in this little basement apartment in this town that I don't know hardly anyone with a little baby and just was trying to figure out ways that I could earn money from home and fell into blogging from that. It was a brand new phenomenon. This was 2004, 2005, people really didn't even know what a blog was. So you'd have to explain what a blog was before you told them what you blogged about. And I started just blogging about a lot of different things, kind of a mommy blog that was a Christian mommy blog. And then from there, really discovered that people were very fascinated with things about saving money and about how we were eating on so little, how I was using coupons, how I was playing the drugstore game. And so after blogging about that on that blog for about 2 years, really felt like I wanted to do a spinoff blog that was specifically about saving money. So 2007 started moneysavingmom.com, not knowing that the economy was going to tank and that like coupons were going to become the thing because media would be talking about you should use coupons at the grocery store and people would go and they would Google how to use coupons at the grocery store. I was one of the few sites that was teaching people how to do that. And so my site would pop up. So within a year, it just grew and grew. And then we were making a full-time income off of it. And never saw that the side little thing that I thought I was going to do was going to turn into our family's full-time thing.
Wow, that is so crazy. What would you say to someone who's listening and has a dream or has something that they feel like God has put on their heart? How would you encourage them?
I think the biggest thing that I learned is that failure can actually be a really good thing. So I started Money Saving Mom in 2007, but what I didn't talk about is the multiple things that I tried before then that didn't work. And I had multiple failed businesses. And just really each time would say, okay, why didn't that work? What can I learn from it? What did work that I can take and pull from? And I actually had this idea about a year before I started moneysavingmom.com that I would start this site that was going to be about saving money. I saw some friends that they were doing this and they had Google ads on their sidebar and they were making $1,000 a month, some months off of just their ads on their sidebar. And I was like, I could do that. So I worked really hard, set up this site. It was crickets. Like it did not go anywhere. And I realized because I was trying to do their vision, like this was a thing that God had called them to, and I was just trying to copy it. And so I think the biggest thing that I would encourage you is make sure that you are uniquely stepping into what God is calling you to, not doing something just because it looks like a great idea that someone else is doing. That's a thing that I've had to learn the hard way. And then also to really think outside the box and to not see that if something doesn't work, well, that just means that, I'm never going to be able to have an online business. That just means that you need to go back to the drawing board and learn some new things and pivot and try again. One of the things that I did commit to We invested $2,000 of our own money in the very beginning and then never invested another penny of our own money. We didn't have extra money to invest. And so I had to get really creative with that little bit of money to figure out ways to make money and make that grow that then I could invest when I started something new. And there are just so many different opportunities online, but I would say it's easy to get focused. It's easy to lose focus because there's shiny thing, shiny thing, shiny thing, all these experts telling you you should be doing all these different things. And I found do one thing at a time. Like with my site, it's like start the site, then start an email newsletter, then add one social media. Learn that really well. Then you could add another social media platform. Like you don't have to do all the things at once. Grow slowly and don't get discouraged if something doesn't work. Use that as an opportunity to learn and pivot.
That's good. I can see why you said driven.
I don't take no for an answer easily. So, and it's a great thing because with an internet business nowadays, like you have to constantly be learning and changing and being forward thinking because it is a constantly changing market. I mean, when I started, there was no social media. We had blogs and we had comments and we had email. And to think of where it is now, like we could have never envisioned what it is like now. And so you have to be changing and learning and growing and pivoting and trying new things and experimenting and failing because that's how your business is going to continue to stay afloat.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And you have kids, so how can you tell, first of all, how many kids you have, and then how do you balance your work and your family life?
Yes, we have six kids. They're 19 down to two, 19, 17, 15. Then we had 10 years of secondary infertility. And then we have a 4-year-old, 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. Our second 4-year-old was adopted from foster care. He has some very significant disabilities, will need lifelong caregiving. And he has just turned our world upside down in the most wonderful of ways. But balancing a lot of children and a lot wide age range and working full time because I am our family's full-time breadwinner. It's just constantly an exercise in trusting the Lord, resting in Him, learning to not micromanage and control my life. I think the biggest thing for me is I have to let go of this vision of what I think it should look like and really embrace right where I am today. I mean, for instance, it was probably 35 minutes ago, my 4-year-old came to me. She's like, Mom, would you read to me? And there were a lot of things that needed to get done and some time sensitive things. And to just stop and be like, absolutely, I can go upstairs and we can sit in your little tent in the playroom and we can read for 5 minutes. And then mommy's gonna need to, do some other things because mommy has some stuff going on today. And so being willing to stop and do that, that filled up her love tank. And so just getting creative and looking for opportunities to really have those one-on-one times, but to know that even just a few minutes here or there of really being fully present can make such a difference. The other thing that we have just switched to recently is really compartmentalizing. And so for me, I work from 8 to 2. And then I'm home and really focused on home from 2 to 8. And having those compartmentalized times has been very, very helpful for me. And I feel like I'm so much more present in my job and so much more present in my home by compartmentalizing.
That's really good. That's really good. Well, this is a whole different switch. I don't know how to nicely switch it to something else. One, you have some really great blogs. I'm going to, for sure, if people don't have you on social media, tag that in because I think they'll be really filled up by all of your things. You have budget things, but then you also have just a lot of soul things, I feel like, or spiritual things, things that are going on in your life that you really share with people and are really vulnerable that make people feel like, oh my gosh, I really know her. I really can identify with that. And one of them that really spoke to me was the sadness of losing friends. I don't know if you remember that one, probably, right?
Yeah.
Um, that one just really hit home with me. I think we can all identify with that at some time in our life. Would you be able to explain a little bit about that if people are like, thanks, Nancy, I have no idea what you're speaking about.
Yeah, well, I think that friendship breakups are something that it's a very real reality. And it's also something that we don't talk about very often. I mean, it's a difficult subject to talk about, especially publicly. I wrote this Instagram post that I started writing a year before and didn't ever know if it was something I was going to be sharing publicly because I thought it was just for me. I was writing to process a friendship break that was really, really painful that had happened 4 years before, really out of the blue. But just writing this of how God used that for so much good in my life and how he has really caused that to help me to it's easy to when something like that happens to want to almost blame the other person. Well, it's like their fault or what they did or whatever. But instead to say, okay, what can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? I think that that's what we're talking about when it comes to business failure and things like that, but also other failures in your life or other just hard things in your life. How can I grow from this? What can I learn from this so that next time I'm a healthier person? And I think for me, it really caused me to step back and spend a lot of time seeking the Lord and learning to find my joy, my hope, my fulfillment in Him. I think friendship and community is so important. But if we are trying to find from someone else what only God can give, we're always going to be in dysfunctional relationships because people aren't God. And they are going to fail us and they are going to disappoint us, and we're going to fail them and we're going to disappoint them. And so, having that mindset of, I'm so filled up and content in Jesus that I don't need something from someone else that is a dysfunctional need, but instead I can walk into this space, I can walk into this room, I can walk into this relationship from that place of knowing how much I'm loved by God. And then I can just love others wholeheartedly. And for me, that's just given me so much freedom in relationships. And it's really helped me to have so much healthier relationships because I feel like when I'm healthier as a person, I'm going to attract healthier people and we're going to have healthier relationships.
How do you not get jaded or maybe not even go into a relationship? Or, like you said, for me, I could go into relationships, but I couldn't go deep then. Or that would be my kind of go-to, right? As far as protecting myself is, yeah, I'll be, make another friend, but not really go deep to protect myself. What would you say to that?
I think it's hard. Like once you've been really deeply hurt, it's hard to be willing to trust again because trust is vulnerable. Like it is vulnerable. It's taking the armor off and letting people in. And if you've done that and then it feels like you've gotten stabbed in the back, you're like, I'm just not going to do that again. I'm just going to keep my armor on. I'm going to keep everybody at arm's length and then I'm safe. But the thing is, you're also really lonely. And so I think to recognize like trust is going to require you to put yourself out there. One thing that I've learned from this is I've been a lot more cautious in relationships, but that doesn't mean that I'm not willing to trust again. I've been a lot more careful. So I'm not, I told, that I'm a passionate person and I'm driven. And so I can be the kind of person where I can find someone, I'm like, this is my person. And I just want to jump all in, 150 miles an hour. And I've been a lot more cautious and, just carefully kind of let the relationship slowly develop. And that's been really healthy for me. And it's also helped me because I think it's caused me to be more careful in, just how I am opening up. Because I think in the past, it was almost this dysfunctional thing for me. Like I wanted this person to know everything about me right away. And it's been a really good thing for me to be more slow about opening up. And it's not that I'm not trusting a person, it's kind of like that trust but verify. And one of the other things that I realized is I was often attracted to people who had no one else. Like, so it was almost like I was their one and only. And I've really learned that that is usually the mark of an unhealthy person. Like if they don't have community around them, if they don't have other good friends, that's a bit of a red flag. And so to want to be good friends with people who also have other good friends and other longtime friends. That's a thing that's been really helpful for me, and to recognize like that's the mark of someone who is likely in a healthier position. And so looking for that and celebrating that for them, like celebrating their other friends, celebrating their other friendships, instead of kind of like me wanting to be jealous of that. Like it was a very dysfunctional thing for me. And so working through that, and I think taking it slowly. And then also for me, it is, not every time I put myself out there is it going to turn into a great relationship. In fact, the majority of the time I put myself out there, it's not going to turn into a great relationship. And so giving myself permission to be like, you know what, it's probably going to take 10 to 20 no's for there to be a yes. And, again, that's probably a good thing that I'm driven. Because you have to be willing to put yourself out there, but do it in a way that is sort of safe in a sense. Like, so for me, it'll oftentimes I'll be like, hey, I'd love to get together and have coffee, or do you want to meet up at the park and have a play date? Do something where it's like you start it out in a very sort of safe environment for you, especially if your heart's been really hurt and broken. So it's like if you meet someone for coffee, you could even plan it. You could be like, I have to leave at, we're meeting at 12. I have to leave at 1. Just giving yourself that kind of that you have that safety net of knowing I'm only going to be here for an hour. So if this turns out really poorly, it's only an hour. And I think for me that was helpful to just kind of start with these strong boundaries in place so that I wasn't just like, come over for dinner and let's, I mean, I just feel like starting small, and maybe it's that you're meeting them somewhere else instead of inviting them into your home at first. Whatever you need to do for your heart, and not starting a long-term sort of thing. Just trying coffee. And if that doesn't work, it doesn't work. If you meet them and you're like, I just don't feel like this is going to be a good fit, that's okay. But to continue to invite, to continue to reach out, don't wait for other people to be the friend that you wish that you had. You reach out and you go be that friend, but don't expect and be hurt if they don't reciprocate in the way that you would love them to reciprocate. The other thing for me that's been really helpful is once I get to the place of, we've met a few times and we're starting to like, I really feel like there's something there, to just be super honest of like, this is what I'm looking for in relationship, and I'm just going to put it out there. And I totally understand if you are not in the place to feel like this is, the type of relationship that you have space for. 100% that is okay. I get it. But I just want you to know, like, this is where I'm at. And that's been really helpful to me, because then it's not like I've made up in my head, like, this is how it's going to go or this is how it's going to be. But it's like, I am just putting it out there. And then sometimes they'll be like, I'm not really in a place for that kind of relationship. And then you haven't gotten all hurt and disappointed when they couldn't be what you had hoped it would be. So those are just some things that have been really helpful for me. And God has just brought some really beautifully sweet, deep relationships and friendships into my life as a result of that. But I feel like in a much healthier way. And so I do think you can rebuild that trust, but I think it's okay to let your heart grieve and then set up some good boundaries and approach it in a way that is going to be a lot healthier for you in the long run.
You're right. I feel like once we get older, maybe even college and past, we don't talk about it, but it's something that we talk about all the time with our kids. Like, yes, the other day I was on a one-on-one date with my son, and that's what he talked about most of the time was his friends and, some of his good friends now and some friends that, moved or some friends that aren't friends anymore, and all this. And we talked about it, and I gave a little bit of advice maybe or thoughts or yeah, I've been there, I feel you, that sort of thing. But then all of a sudden we kind of clam up when we get older as far as friendships and things like that. So another like little hard shift here is you are starting to get into budgeting. And I am so excited. You've talked about how this is a new thing for you. Could you talk about why you're starting it and why you haven't done it before and what we might expect seeing from you in January in 2025?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been blogging on moneysavingmom.com since 2007, talking about finances since 2005. Vish on the internet. So this will be like my 20th year of talking about saving money. And for years, I just talked about saving money on groceries. I talked about your grocery budget. I talked about having cash envelopes for your groceries. Like everything was these sort of what I would call safe money topics. Because for me, I really felt like I can talk about this. I have a lot of experience and it's something that I know really well. It's something that I've taught a lot of people and I feel very confident in this. But if people were to ask me how to set up a budget or how to get out of debt or other types of things, investing, retirement, insurance, all of that, I was like, no, I'm not your person because I really felt like that I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the experience to be able to talk about anything but really, you know, home economics, if we're going to call it that. But I just have felt like there's such a need for budgeting, but from a standpoint of just really practical, simple, like teaching budgeting from someone who doesn't like spreadsheets, someone who isn't good at math, someone who, doesn't have letters after their name, doesn't have this financial certification, someone who's just an everyday mom who's lived on a budget for 22 years, and to just share how it has impacted our life. And so actually I started just feeling this like nudge from the Lord to be talking more about money in very practical terms. At the beginning of this year, I kind of started moving towards what would that look like. And then my publisher came back to me. I had a 3-book contract and I knew that the third book was going to be coming up. And they came back to me and said, "Are you ready to write your next book? We'd really love for you to write a money book." And my very first book that I wrote years ago was a money book, but I didn't have an agent, didn't have a proposal, didn't have a clue, and it's a terrible book. And I've always been super embarrassed by it. No, I mean, I'm being honest. You can go read the Amazon reviews. And I didn't know what I was doing. And it's literally like this compilation of blog posts that was not edited well at all. And I've always been very embarrassed of that book, but I learned a lot from it. That was something that I would consider to be a failure that I learned from. And so for future books, I had a completely different approach. But they were like, kind of this is your opportunity that you could do a do-over. It's with a different publisher and it would be a very different sort of book, but still on the topic of money. And I felt like when they said that, there was just that confirmation of the Lord because I'd really been praying about, okay, what does this look like? What are you calling me to? And so I spent a few months really wrestling with the insecurity that I felt over talking about budgeting and specifics of money management and financial stewardship, and then just really allowing myself to recognize that, I've let these negative beliefs really stifle me from stepping into something that God is calling me to do. And I think I was so afraid of maybe some of the backlash that I got when that first book came out. And then also just knowing that you're not going to please everybody. And, some people are going to say that's real dumb and that won't work. And that's okay. I'm still going to put myself out there for the people that need to hear this. And it's been so cool because over the last few months, then I've kind of been putting some things out there, asking some questions online, and just recognizing that there are so many people who actually really want to have a budget. They just don't know how to get started, or they also just believe they can't because they don't have a set income. Well, we've always lived on income that varies. And we've also budgeted when the money didn't even make sense on paper. Like there wasn't enough coming in, but we still had a budget, and a budget was so helpful even when we were barely making ends meet. And we've also budgeted when there was a lot of extra. And so, kind of having that experience and seeing how much it has impacted our life, I'm just really excited to get to show people that a budget is not something that's really stifling and a negative thing, but it's something that's really empowering and something that is a positive thing and something that can allow you to be able to have money to spend on making memories with your family and spend on fun things and spend on giving, but also at the same time to be able to prioritize your financial future and what does that look like? And so I'm really excited about it, really excited about the book. It'll be coming out in 2026. So this next year, we're just going to be doing a lot with a lot of different resources and printables and videos and some products and things to just really give people very practical tools to step by step by step. Here, I'm going to hold your hand and walk you through exactly here's how to set up a budget, here's why, here's the benefit that it's going to be in your life, and here's how it's going to give you freedom.
I think that'll be great. So we'll have people, if they are interested, then they can just follow you, get on your email list, and they'll start to get some of that.
Yes, yes. Well, we should be launching early January. We're going to be doing a lot with kind of helping people who want to set up a budget for the new year. We're going to be doing a lot with that. So.
Oh, I love it. Well, and I should have this number, but finances is one of the things that tears marriages apart, that, it just wreaks havoc on our life. And I don't know the percentages, but it's terribly high. And so I think that's so great because when you're not in debt and you don't have this weight on you, then it just makes life just a little bit easier, right?
I think there's so much tension and so much stress that is in people's lives as a result of money struggles. And what was so interesting, I think it was last week, I asked on Instagram for people to answer the question, people who want to have a budget but don't have a budget, why don't you have a budget? And I said, all your answers are going to be anonymous. I'm not sharing this, but I just am very curious. And by and large, one of the number one things that was said, people said they don't have a budget because they're too scared to look at the numbers. And to me, that was just, I mean, that's kind of shocking because that says that they don't even have a clue. Like they don't have a clue what their numbers are. So no wonder you have constant stress because you have no idea. If you have enough coming in, you have no idea where it's going. Like you aren't even willing to actually look at the numbers because it scares you so much. And so I think to give people this understanding that actually looking at the numbers is going to take away so much fear because once you start doing it, it's going to be hard at first. But once you start doing it and you keep doing it for a little while, you're going to not have to worry. When I pay this bill, when I swipe this card, when I buy this thing, am I going to have enough to be able to keep the lights on in my house and put food in my fridge? But if you don't even know what's going on, of course you're going to just be living in constant kind of that nagging, gnawing sense that, things aren't good.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. That's really interesting. Well, I have loved our time together, and I am going to, like I said, put your social media things out there and have people get in touch with you via your email list and anything like that to kind of learn more about you and what you're sharing and about budgeting. And as we end our podcast, I always love to end with these questions. What is your favorite Bible verse or story?
So, my favorite Bible story that has been for years and years and years is the story of Joseph. And I love the story because it is such a story of redemption. And it is such a reminder that God uses really hard things for good. And, we get to see the end of his story, but he didn't know the end of his story when his brothers were mocking him, when he's in that pit left all alone, put there by his brothers, when he's sold into slavery, when he's dealing with Potiphar's wife, when he's in prison, when he thinks he's going to maybe get out of prison because he interprets this dream and then the guy forgets about it. Just thing after thing after thing after thing where he chose to trust in the Lord and to give his best. We see him continually rising to the top, and that's because he was a man of character, and I really think a man of faith. And so I just love his story when you're going through hard times, when it feels like, the punches just keep coming, to remember that God is the one that's writing the end of the story. And had he not been in that pit and been in that prison, he would have never then been in the position that he was later on. Like God was preparing him in the pit and in the prison. And so just a reminder that in those hard things in life, you never know what God's preparing you for.
Yeah, and I think it was about 30 years or so. And we can easily say that because we know how the story ends. But I don't like to wait for, I feel like I'm in this time of waiting. I don't really know what I'm waiting for. I just feel like God is saying, there's something coming, there's something different, there's something. And it's so hard. And, it's only been about a year or so of this kind of waiting and 30 years, and then not to get discouraged and not to, like, he still had a soft heart, obviously, for his brothers when they came and saw him. So that's pretty amazing. What are you grateful for?
So much. I think for me, just this year, God has taught me so much about his faithfulness. And there's been a lot of stretching things this year, and he's just continued to show his faithfulness to me in little ways. Like just recently, I was praying for God to bring another mom who had a child with disabilities that could just really kind of understand the road that I'm walking. And would you believe it? I mean, only God. Like that day, this woman who I had met months before, had not had any contact with in the last few months, texted me and she invited me to this retreat with other moms who have children with disabilities that was absolutely free to go to, that then I got accepted into. And she said, "Hey, like I'd love to start getting together regularly." And she has a son who is about 6 years older than David. And it was just like God saying, "I see you. Like I see you. I have not forgotten you." And he's just been answering some very specific prayers in such specific ways that it just makes you feel so loved and so seen and so valued.
That's amazing. What kindness have you received, or what kindness have you shown in the last week?
I saw this question and I thought it was such a great question. I think we don't stop and think about kindness often enough. But just last night, my daughter, it had been a long day and I'd been gone most of the day. And so my almost 20-year-old who's home from college right now for Christmas break, I had gotten all the kids home. My husband, he coaches baseball, so he's at baseball coaching. We'd been at my son's basketball game, so I get all the kids home, and there were some attitudes and some people who were really needy and everything. And I was taking care of all of the little kids, and she just went out and she cleaned up the whole kitchen and she took care of all these things. Like I didn't even ask her, and I was like, "Honey, you don't need to do that." And I come out, and the kitchen was all cleaned up, everything was put away, and it was just it might seem like such a simple thing, but it's like, again, God saying to me, like, "I see you, I'm taking care of you, and you're not alone." And it was such a kind thing, and it blessed me.
Oh, I love it. I love being able to be reminded of some of these small things. So thank you for sharing. And thank you for being on. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your story. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with our guests, and just can't wait to see what God does with your budgeting endeavor in 2025.
Thank you so much for having me on. Thanks for being excited for how God's leading, and I'm grateful for you and the work that you're doing here.
Thank you. Well, at Ordinary People, Extraordinary Things, your story is His glory.